Hey everyone. So I was telling the folks that I was sitting with a moment ago that I committed the cardinal sin of management, which is I arrived back at the office on Friday and I said, we're going to redo the whole talk. Let's go. We're going to do it this weekend. This is a true story. I spent the last week on the road with my favorite customers, our customers, and some of our top customers. And there is a trend, which it now occurs to me the title of the deck gives away. There is a trend that is accelerating in our industry that is incredibly exciting, and it seems to be coming to every single one of our customers, and I'm sure really the rest of the industry, which is machine learning, machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, and it's incredibly exciting, and there's a lot going on, there's a lot to be excited about, and it's also, in my opinion, having talked to some of these folks, quite a bit concerning. So I'll start with a question for the audience, which is, you're data scientists, you're data analysts, you're data engineers, maybe you are VPs of analytics, chief data officers. What is the value that you bring to that role? What does the company get from you? What does society get from you because you are in that role? And this is a pretty savvy audience, and this is a pretty sophisticated audience. So I'm going to guess that there's a lot of heads thinking about business value. We're going to get more revenue. We're going to get more customers. We're going to get more users. We're going to get higher engagement. And believe me, I'm a CEO. I love business value. When our teams come to me and go, we're going to measure ourselves on business value, we're going to get more business value, I go, outstanding. Hell yes, let's do that. And some of you may actually also be thinking about social value and societal value, right? One of our customers is Tinder, and they're thinking about, if we improve the matching algorithm using Periscope, which I'm very proud of, if they improve the matching algorithm, that's a lot more happy people. Maybe in the medium to long term, that's a lot more families, and isn't that good for society? That's also a really great, maybe even a better answer, right? These are both terrific answers. The problem is, it's not enough. And so let's turn our attention for a second to an extremely data-driven company, a really data-forward company, maybe a company that we aspire to be as data-driven as. This is a team that built an incredible ranker at a time when the industry was maybe not yet doing as much as the industry is doing now. They said, I know, let's get together and let's do a ranking of all the stories from all of your friends and sort them in a way that will generate enormous amounts of user value. And, old friends are closer together than ever before. And family members, including my own family, is closer than ever before because of this incredible ranker that we built. And so that's a lot of societal value. It's also a lot of business value, right? In fact, it would be hard to name a piece of machine intelligence that has generated more business value, maybe in the history of computing, than the ranker that the Facebook team built. And yet, it has contributed, arguably, to a political outcome that we may feel is less ideal than it could be. And so you want to... giving away maybe my own politics for a moment. And so you may feel... if you are a data scientist, you're some of our customers like the ones that I visited over the past week, and you are starting this journey that this company is much farther along on, what is the obligation that you have? What is the value that you bring? What do you need to be thinking about as you embark on a journey of building something that you hope will be as sophisticated and as technologically sound as what Facebook built? This brings me back to my question again. If you're a data professional, and because of all the buzz out in the industry and all of the sort of skill building that you're doing and all the meetups that you're coming to, you're thinking about, we could do this really cool classification. We could do all this great ranking. We could do these recommendations, this matchmaking. We can do all of this artificial intelligence. What responsibility do you have as you sit down to build those things? A couple more examples from my experience. This is a really fun one. This is an academic project, and they built an AI judge, an actual criminal judge. Right? And so, of course, the easy question here is that a good idea? Do we want to have AI judges? Do we want to have computers sitting in judgment? But of course, no one is really proposing that, right? I think these scientists in academia would be the first ones to tell you that they are not actually proposing that we have AI judges. But that's my point, right? The point is, when you build something like this, when you set out to build something like this, you start to take responsibility for how is it going to be used in the world. As you frame it out, as you put it out there, as you say to the world, here is a cool thing that technology can do, we now also as an industry, as a group of people, as data professionals, have a responsibility to say to the world, here is how we think it should be used, here is how we plan to distribute it, and here is how we don't think it should be used, and here is how we plan to restrict it. Another fun example. This one is near and dear to my heart. There's actually, these headlines refer to a couple of examples. One of them is a facial recognition software, a classifier. And this particular classifier, this particular facial recognition, was built by a team of folks of European descent, much like myself. And it turned out to be very good at recognizing faces of European descent. And it turned out to not be as good at recognizing faces of African descent or of Asian descent, which proved to be a pretty big embarrassment when it got out into the world. And so you have to ask yourself, this may be from a pure science and from a pure computing point of view, I actually don't know, but it may be an advancement. Maybe there are heuristics or algorithms used here that are better than a lot of the ones that have been used in the past. But if when it gets out into the world, it contributes to less diversity and a less inclusive culture and less sort of trust across cultural boundaries, then is it actually a net positive or is it a net negative? And what responsibility does the team that builds it have to make sure that they are using a diverse set of training data, to make sure that the algorithm is right, to make sure that the feature selection is right, and ultimately to make sure that they are building this with a diverse team that will recognize all of those problems that they have before it gets out into the world. I'll move quickly through another couple ones. Keep hitting that button twice. This is actually a customer of ours that uses machine learning to assist doctors when they are making diagnostic decisions. So showing them what are the different diagnoses that you may have missed, and how, what other options can we provide to you. This obviously opens a whole nother can of worms and perhaps even more deep moral questions around life and death as the doctors make these decisions. And finally, this is a fun one for the end, but Target, I guess, launched a classifier that tried to guess whether you were pregnant and made a pretty big mistake. So this brings me to my point, which I hope at this point is a little bit obvious, which is it's going to be us. It's going to be the folks in this room as we sit down to build these algorithms that are ultimately going to know what is it good to be used for, what is the right way to use this kind of thing, and what is the wrong way to use this kind of thing. I'm here to tell you as a CEO, it's not going to be your CEO. And it's not going to be your users, and it's not going to be your customers, and it's not going to be your government, because they ultimately don't know how this technology works, and they ultimately don't know the best uses for this technology. And so as I sit with the folks who are building this stuff today, my observation is that there is maybe not enough focus on what are the moral and ethical implications of the software we've decided to build. As you get that gleam in your eye, and as you go, okay, great, what can I do with this? What are the cool technologies I can build? Think also, what would the implications be, right? What's the best way to use this software? What's the best way for society for me to distribute this software? Okay, cool, quick break. Who's this jerk who's lecturing me? So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Periscope Data. We make this data analysis software that people use for many different things, including the machine learning applications I was just talking about. I'm especially proud of customers spend about 20 hours per user per week in the product. So folks live in the product doing all this different kind of analysis. And our mission is to turn data teams into superheroes. And so as I think about our mission and as we look out into the world about what's next for data teams becoming superheroes, we think about how can we help these superheroes. You think about Captain America, you think about Superman, you think about Wonder Woman. A lot of what you think about is leading from a moral point of view, leading from the point of view of what the world should look like, refusing to make these ethical compromises. And so that's something we're just starting to think about as we observe people using our software in this way. I want to share one positive example because I can't help it. Maybe this team is Wonder Woman. Crisis Textline is a nonprofit that receives texts from people or has a text line that you can use if you are feeling depressed, if you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed, if you are maybe contemplating suicide. And they have volunteers, trained volunteers that will answer your text 24/7 if you want to text them. And they have started using machine learning to suggest answers in real time to the responders of these text messages, and they can actually start to measure the positive cultural impact. And it's so inspiring to sit with this team because the particular way that they're using the software and the particular company that they have means that they have been thinking about moral outcomes from the very beginning. And so when they sit down to train a new version of a model that think to themselves, is plus 1,000 here, but minus 50 over here good? I mean, it certainly seems good from a math point of view, but is that a kind of decision we want to make? That's the kind of thinking that I think is inspirational for the rest of the industry, and I think see teams like this leading here. So 2 thoughts I have to leave you with around what we can do about this. The first, as I said before, is everyone in this room can be thinking as we go back to our desks and as we open our text editors, what are the outcomes that we want to have from the software that we're building? Is my company using the outputs of my work in the right way? Am I planning for the work to be used in the right way? That's thing one. Thing two is inspired a little bit by chief security officers. So we have seen at our companies, at our customers, increasingly folks hiring a role or promoting into a role called the chief data officer. If you're a data company and your customer promotes a chief data officer, that's really good news for you. You're really excited about that. But what I think that how these folks can be inspired and how these folks can think about their role is, the CISO is more than just the manager of the InfoSec team and does more than just evaluate and pen test and all of these things. They're also sort of the moral authority at the company for what do I do in the event of a data breach? How do we think about security? How do we think about what the right levels of disclosure are? And they become sort of the chief voice for security internally and externally. To bring it home, you may have noticed that Facebook's CISO recently resigned over the level of disclosure in the Russia investigation. I think chief data officers can occupy the same role at these companies. If you are thinking about eventually getting to a C-level position at your company, or if you are already a chief data officer, you can be the moral authority internally and externally for, are we using data correctly? Are we proud of the ultimate outcomes of the data that the data processing that we're doing? And is this the right thing to do every time we launch a data-related change? So that's it. That's us. Thanks very much.
Amazing talk.
Thank you, I think.
Thank you very much. No, it's terrific. What do you think about, I guess, organizations that can help us that? So, the fundamental premise, I wholeheartedly agree with. If you're a developer, you sort of need your job.
Yeah.
And being the, chief conscience officer, even if you're a CDO, you're still exposed to, pressure from a business perspective, right? I mean, so is the next step to sort of band together? I guess there's things like OpenAI and others that provide more power to the individual.
Yeah, so I think OpenAI is really great. I think that where the technology industry and the technology community has really shined historically is in those really open, democratic kinds of movements. If we said the CEOs of 6 companies are going to get together in a consortium and figure this stuff out, I'd be quite worried, right? But if we said we're all going to have a series of open dialogues and we're going to have a pretty open and transparent culture, both internally at the company, because there are going to be confidential decisions, but also broadly as an industry, if every time we get together like this, we can talk openly about it, that I think is what leads to the best outcomes. I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but I think OpenAI is a great example of that, especially because they're committed to working out in the open that way.
Is there a role for regulation?
I think probably yes. That's such a hard question. I think that the impact that tech is having, this went to a question you asked at the beginning of the evening around the impact in the first decade versus the second decade. The impact is only accelerating, and I think it behooves us to participate in that process. I mean, this is just another democratic process, right? We elect our leaders. We expect them to hold broader societies accountable. We shouldn't feel like we're immune to that or above that. We should participate in that process.
So maybe I'll open up to questions in a second, but any words on Periscope and how you guys what are you guys doing in the next few years? What's the plan from a product perspective and business perspective?
Sure. So we make a platform for data analysts, data scientists, data engineers. People do everything from reporting to kind of investigative analysis, like how do I need to route my ships around the world in order to get these goods there on time, to more of the prediction and machine learning and data science that I was talking about a little bit in the talk. And we think about bringing that team together onto one platform. We think about fostering collaboration between those different team members. And I think about it simultaneously on a technological level and also on a team and culture level. So the technological level is, okay, you know, given that data engineering and data science and data analysis is happening on the same platform, I should be able to, when I am changing, an integration from Salesforce into a warehouse, I should be able to know which reports at the other end of the pipeline are being affected. And I should be able to stage those changes out. And I should be able to try a version of that whole pipeline and then see if I like it and then push that to production. And so really getting all those workflows connected together, so that vision of when a data engineer is doing something, the data analyst all the way on the other end of the spectrum can see what they're doing and understand the impact. That's probably another 2 or 3 years of work for us. And then simultaneously, it's when the data engineer and the data analyst are on the same platform, they're part of one team and they're collaborating together. So it's not the analyst bought a new thing and now 1,000 new queries are running on the warehouse and the engineer is upset and there's a fight. It's these things are happening together on one platform and it's fostering an air of collaboration and the opportunity for us, to be one team and to accomplish something greater together. So that's the ultimate mission. And I think from a software point of view, it's 2-3 years of work.
Great. We have questions. One over here.
Great talk. So I was wondering about cases where the business sort of incentives aren't exactly aligned with the societal incentives.
That's so weird. When can that happen?
I have no idea. Not that like any of the recent news has anything to say about that.
Yeah.
So my question is like, what do you think about how you should try and balance these two sort of potentially competing interests?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that always happens. And I would say every company and every team is on some journey of balancing these things and understanding these things. And the fact that you're doing something at your business that isn't purely for the societal good, but also hopes to make money isn't bad, right? What we should be aiming for is an open conversation with our teams and with our leadership about these things. And so I would actually say, in a past life, I worked at Google, actually on machine learning and ordered 10 blue links, if you can believe it. And the culture there that has taken some beatings recently, I think probably deservedly, but had a pretty good model of when we think we see a problem, when we think we are working on something that is going to make us some money in the short term but not be helpful for society, that is something that we expect our leaders to be accountable to. We expect to be able to show up to a forum and talk openly about it, and not that we're necessarily going to reverse that decision the next day, and not that necessarily they're going to agree with us every time, but as long as we can have the open dialogue and as long as we can have the conversation, we feel like we're moving in the right direction. And if we feel like we're not having that dialogue and we feel like we're being told to just put our head down and go back to work and not have this conversation, that I think would be more problematic and evidence of a place where maybe you don't want to be.
Somebody who hasn't asked the question.
Hi, I come from a financial services background, so I come by my cynicism. Well deserved. Aside from, enough people of goodwill feeling like they're in the wrong place and that the culture is the wrong, like what other incentives when, all the incentives are to be, closed and try to hide as much of this problem as possible. If you look at like Equifax or, other than the incentives that it comes out and it's worse, or people leave because they can't put up with it. Like it seems like all the incentives go the other direction. How do you get a culture to have the incentives to be open and to try to do the right thing, or at least to talk about what the right thing is? Gosh,
so first of all, it's a hard question. And second of all, I kind of flippantly at the end of my answer just previously tossed out, well, maybe you don't want to be there. That, obviously it's a nice privilege to be able to just change jobs whenever you want, and that's not something everybody can do. I will say I'm an optimist about this stuff, and so I would hold out Equifax as an example, and maybe from the financial services industry, Enron would be another example where I do, or the entire financial situation a decade ago, the situation in this town a decade ago. doing bad shit and trying to keep it secret, is increasingly not working, at least in my view. And I think you can be a help to your culture, and it helps to frame it maybe in cynical terms if you're in a culture like that, and say, we're going to get our lunch eaten if we keep behaving this way. Look at all of these previous examples. Wouldn't we like to behave in a more open and a more transparent way? Wouldn't we like to discuss these issues in the light of day? I know that sounds all very idealistic. I do believe it works in the long run. But as I said, it's a journey, and we all start somewhere.
One more question over there. I mean, I guess as a quick addition to this, I mean, the sort of equally cynical view is that other parts of the world may think of this very differently and may do whatever it takes to win global advantage.
I mean, hey, that's true. And also, I mean, we may be wrong, right? I mean, it's all very early here. This is one point of view, and I don't mean to hold us up or myself up as an authority on these matters. So yes, that's very true. I will say broadly speaking, we're in a position of strength. We're building all this great technology. We have this great economy. We have a relatively open society. It's a nice position from which to lead on these issues.
All right, last question of the evening over there.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I was just curious to make it sort of concrete for your case. What do you think is the responsibility, or how you would think about it as the provider of data tools that people like this use? Because there's a whole other trend of not the data analysts themselves, but the tool providers. So Google is working on things like completely brainless use of machine learning, basically. Right. So, learning from learning, they're democratizing their own internal thoughtlessness about this, which you put a bunch of examples of. Yeah. So how do you think about what you would concretely do at Periscope itself? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, for one thing, for me, it starts with the culture at the company, because I don't write every line of code myself, thank God, or not actually allowed to write any lines of code anymore. But we try to reject the view that we provide a tool, and therefore we have no responsibility for the tool. It's yours now, use it. And so we try to do a few things. First of all, we try to accept responsibility for how the tool is being used and then act accordingly. So that's the guiding principle. And then that leads to a couple actions so far, one of which is trying to use our platform as the provider of the tool to talk about these issues. And so, that can come when people ask for features that seem like they would be used for nefarious purposes. I try not to take a hard line or say no or whatever, but I do try to say, let's have an open conversation about this. What's this about? That's thing one. And then thing two, regarding brainlessness in particular, we are pretty queasy about, AI in a box. Press this button, AI a thing, it'll predict for you, you're going to be great. We make a tool, we frame it as a tool for data professionals on purpose. The idea is there should be a person making these, doing these analyses, making these guiding decisions, supervising this, and we're comfortable with that position. We're comfortable providing tools and an open dialogue to somebody who is an expert and who does have a brain and a heart, right? We're less comfortable with it's automagical. But that's where we are today, and we may be somewhere different next week.
Great. That was a fantastic discussion. Thank you.